The Blind Tony Story. Book 9, Chapter 4. Pia and I were inseparable, but we were never lovers. And even though I found her highly attractive, she was just too aggressive for me. She was a product of her own past, and I knew if I ever gave my body to her, that would be a wrap, shut down, fatal attraction. She already thought that she owned my mind, as I said earlier. In many ways, I view Pia as an angel in disguise, sent by God. She resurrected my life when it was at its lowest point, when I was about to kill myself. But at times, she could also be a demon straight from the pits of hell, and she became my worst nightmare at times. I remember once when I told her that she had to leave my apartment, she told me she wasn't going anywhere, and then she stabbed me. And then when I went to grab the hand that had the knife in it, she stabbed me again with the screwdriver she had in the other hand behind her back. She broke my antique 18-karat Florentine gold watch. It was full of them. She also tore a beautiful gold chain off my neck. She knew how much I loved both of those items. I had to almost knock her out before I could get her out of my apartment. She was the first woman I ever hit in my life. And then she stood outside the door and screamed and hollered for the next 20 minutes. Finally, she went outside the building and stood out front with a 2x4 in her hand, waiting for me to come out. I could see it through the window. Eventually, she went to the phone booth and called the police and brought them to my apartment and told them that I refused to give her clothes. I told the officers that she only had one outfit when I met her, and she was welcome to have that back. But everything else, including what she has on right now, belonged to me. They asked her if that was true, and she said yes. However, I agreed to give her several outfits, as long as she took them right then and there and did not come back again. She agreed, and they left. They escorted her. Pia went into a drug rehab, and she stayed for a couple months. She went to Project Return, and after that, she returned to the block again, and we were reunited again. I had truly missed her, to be honest with you, and she had missed me. We were an odd couple, Batman and Robin. But she was Batman because she was always picking up something, trying to bust somebody upside their head to beat them down like a bat. And I would have been Robin because I was always plotting on how to rob something or somebody. While she was at Project Return, her counselor turned out to be one of my old clients who had been on my caseload when I was a counselor there. And he had told his caseload, P included, about his mentor, the man who had taught him everything. Pia was in shock. That man was me. She didn't never know about that aspect of my life. Things that make you go, Pia and I were never lovers, like I said, but everybody thought we were. And eventually, she became so possessive that a lot of women were afraid to even speak to me out of fear of what Pia would do to them. She used to let me manage her money and her food stamps, and she never gave money to any man. So I felt very special and also very honored. I have seen Pia make girls turn tricks and she collect the money and give them what she wanted them to have. She could be cruel and heartless. She was no joke, a true living black widow spider. However, there was one that I was sexually intimate with, Miranda. She was part Asian, part black, and part Spanish, and she hated Pia, and Pia hated her. I had to be really, really careful when those two were in the same room together. But I loved them both. And Miranda was very feminine and totally down to earth. She could please a man so many different ways. And she wouldn't hesitate to take me physically whenever and wherever she chose to. And I would rarely, if ever, resist her. She was truly uninhibited, and I loved it. chocolate syrup, ice cubes, whipped cream, ice cream, butter, honey, anything, everything. She was truly just sensual and erotic. She was also very business minded, and she dated several dealers who would pay her hundreds of dollars in cash and hundreds more in drugs just to be with her for one night. Many times these liaisons would take place at my apartment where I would collect the rent as well as the drugs all night long. During these times, I wouldn't let anybody else in the apartment, Pia included, which only served to throw gasoline on a fire that was already raging out of control. Miranda also used to get men to take her to a motel sometimes, and they would spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on her trying to please her. And she would call me to be liaison with the outside world for them. I would get them their meals, their drugs, their cigarettes, and everything else that they needed for a flat fee of $50 per trip plus cab fare. And all the drugs I could skim off the deals. She was definitely a good business partner. I knew I would get to make at least 3 or 4 trips during a 12-hour hotel stay. And when the guy's money ran out, so would she. After a while, I had me a stable of about 3 reliable women who became regulars at my place. They were available at all times if the price were right. Pia refused to sell her body for drugs or money, but she sure lured enough men in, and under false pretenses and then ripped them off. And I would always protect her and refuse to let anybody, none of those disgruntled men, put a hand on her. I would tell them that I felt sorry for them, but it's your own fault. She's my cousin, and you're not going to touch her. That's all there is. I'm sorry about it, but you're not going to hit her. Miranda, on the other hand, was usually at my place too, but her prices were too high for the average person. And then eventually she fell off, and I found her wandering the streets of the Bronx, dirty, hungry, cold, tired, stinking, in the middle of the winter, snow on the ground. I took her to my place, let her sleep better, till they get cleaned up, and then I sent her home to her family. She didn't want to go home, but I made her go. I had found out in her absence that she was married and had children, and her husband had been looking for her. She had been avoiding my neighborhood because she owed some of the dealers their money. She also owed me money. It's amazing how one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen in my life, crack had turned into a dirty, emaciated shell. Nothing like her former self. Crack is from the devil himself, and it definitely robs, kills, and destroys everything it touches. The last time I saw Miranda, she was drug-free and working again, healthy, back with her family, looking very, very beautiful once again. God can restore you now back, even after you've destroyed yourself. Actually, I knew Miranda before I knew Pia or Delicia. When I had met her when I first got out of Project Return and became a counselor, and one day I was leaving the tennis courts and I saw Miranda for the very first time. She was at least a 12 on the 10 scale. And I just stopped her right there on the streets and asked her if I could play a song for her. And I played my flute for her. And I dedicated that song by Joe Cocker, "You Are So Beautiful to Me," to her. And she started crying right there on the street. We drew a crowd. And we started heading for my apartment. And she wanted to stop at the liquor store first and get some to drink. And I sensed that she wanted to get something stronger. So I told her that I don't get high. And then she asked me if I minded. And I said, yes, I do mind. So we went our separate ways. Many years passed before I saw her again. And by then, I was using drugs again. So I walked up to her and asked her if she remembered me. And she said, yes, you're the man that played the flute for me that day. Do you still want to go to your apartment? And I said, yes, as long as we can stop first and pick up some supplies. We both laughed, and the rest, they say, is history. I really had sex with anybody outside of Miranda for pleasure, but I did have sex with other women for money. I became somewhat of a small scale gigolo who would guarantee satisfaction if the price was right. Most of my clients were working women. This too was Miranda's idea. It started from me to her wanting to watch me satisfy some of her friends while she paid. She considered me hers, and she marked her territory every chance she got. I also became lovers with Annie. You remember that girl that I ran into that first day when I found that pipe in the snow? That nurse, the RN, the one who I said didn't belong out there, but she also was beautiful, and we were sexually compatible. Around this time, I met a man who was a big time dealer named Mike. Little black plastic bags, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of bags, so many bags that my fingers would bleed, and they developed calluses. And his people would then fill those little bags with drugs, and he paid really, really good. I didn't have to do anything but that. Eventually, I started hiring people to open the bags for me. I was still making fresh bread every morning. I would also cook breakfast in the morning after being up all night, because when the dealers would close up in the block at midnight, then I would open up and sell drugs to a select clientele all night long. Mike would come to my door in the mornings and we would eat breakfast together. He called me Leroy because he said in the game you should never use your real name, because if anything ever happens and you have to disappear suddenly, unexpectedly, people wouldn't really know who you are. Mickey, he was wild. Even his brothers were scared of him. When he was angry, it's best to leave him alone. But in his anger, he would always seek me out. He liked my music, he liked the ambiance of my apartment, and he liked to listen to the oldies tapes that I used to play. He used to bring over a big bottle of Hennessy, and we would sit down. And every time he would send out for supplies for his crew, he would send out for me. They had guns and money everywhere. One time I went to their apartment when they were moving, and I helped them open up the walls, and the stoves and the cabinets and refrigerators all had false bottoms containing drugs and money. I had never seen an operation that large. Sometimes he would have me put everybody out of my apartment, and he would bring 4 or 5 older Dominican gentlemen to my apartment and have me evaluate samples of the product. And every sample had to be tested in a brand new glass pipe. And then they would examine the screens in the glass and the tubes for the resin color. And they would also watch closely my reactions. And then Mickey would translate into Spanish all my observations. In the end, I was allowed to keep all the samples, usually several $100s worth of drugs. Mickey also taught me the Virgin Mary bath, which enabled you to miraculously bring back 130 grams off every 100 grams of cocaine. The extra 30 grams belonged to the cook, and this opened up tremendous new opportunities for me because I was still cooking most of the drugs for the boys in the block. I also kept Mickey informed about all unauthorized activity that took place at his apartment at night. Several of his workers started using drugs, and they used to try to bribe me not to tell Mickey. But there was no way I wasn't going to tell him. He was too good to me. Plus, he was crazy. Once, when a man from Pennsylvania sold him a stolen motorcycle, Mickey got arrested for it. And he went back to Pennsylvania and brought that man back to the Bronx in the trunk of his car. Mickey told me to go downstairs to the corner garage, take take up a pick up a car and take a look in the trunk while the man was in there still alive. He told me that's what happens to people who cross me. Mickey told me Never seen a smoker who could maintain the way I did. He said it was impossible. Instead of going down, I kept increasing. Instead of selling off all my stuff and possessions, I kept buying new stuff, especially clothes and jewelry. It just was illogical, unnatural. But it was what it was. You don't smoke crack and increase. You go down many times in the middle of the night. His people would get tipped off about an impending raid and bring all the dopes, guns, and money and bags and scales and everything over to my apartment to hide. I also would run errands for him. I got a 16th every day for just taking his trash to the basement. And I would carefully examine all the trash because his people threw out a lot of drugs. And even digital scales when the batteries died. They would just throw away the scale. They also had a statue of the Virgin Mary by the door where people would place lots of money. And one day that statue broke and no one was allowed to touch the money because they said it belonged to God. And they had candle wax all over it. Mickey told me to clean it up and take it to the basement, to the trash room. I was spending $50 bills for weeks. They were covered in candle wax. Once Mickey and I were walking down the street and we saw a $20 bill. And I was about to pick it up and Mickey said, "No, you don't know where that money's been. You don't know what kind of spirit's on it." And he wouldn't let me pick it up. They were very superstitious like that, but I believe now that there was a lot of truth to what he was saying. There are a lot of spirits around us, and they do cover everything. Nevertheless, Mickey paid extremely well, and life was good.